Hey there, and welcome to Alchemist.camp, where we learn to be better Elixir programmers by building things. And today, we're going to build out a bit more of the Alchemist.camp website. Last time, as you may recall, we made a stats logger that would regularly go out and check various sources for information about the stats of the site itself. So it's very meta. And it saves them in a CSV, and the server serves it up, and it works okay. We can get the stats, and all is functional. It's convenient. It's kind of nice. Yeah, get the stats logged. I don't have to put any effort into it. I see YouTube subscribers, videos, views, Twitter, Alexa, but I have like a dozen of these CSVs in my download folder, so it would be better to just be able to still log the stats in the server, but render them in a page instead of just saving them to CSVs. So that's one task for today. The other is to modularize the app a bit more. As you may recall, or be able to see from the names of the episodes, we started off with just a simple Cowboy web server and then built a router and handled static assets, and then built a little bit of a copy of plug.con, and then started rendering EEX templates. And at this point, probably the biggest strange thing about this web server is that the router is more like a kitchen sink than a router. It's literally doing the routing and putting the responses in, and has utility functions for reading CSVs and rendering templates and all kinds of junk. So first thing we'll do is we'll make a new folder in our project. So campsite is the name of our project. Make another folder that goes alongside it. So we should have campsite and then statwatch, and we're going to call this owl, since it's not nearly as cool as a Phoenix, and it's kind of fly-by-night sort of enterprise. And then we're going to move the things that aren't specific to our app into it. And at this point, the main one of those things is a page handler. All of this is related to dealing with Cowboy. And it does, we do use our con, but that's also external to campsite. So we're just going to copy this entire file and put it into owl.pagehandler. And of course, we've got to change the name of the module to owl.pagehandler. And it looks like everything here should work fine. We can delete our old page handler. And then we'll go into our router, not our router, into our main application, application.ex, there we are. And got to change this from campsite.web.pagehandler to owl.web.pagehandler. Okay, and we'll fire up the server just to make sure that all still works. So localhost. And it does. I've got to hit a couple of things outside of the static asset handler though. Oh, does not work. What do we miss? Undefined. Owl's at the wrong level. That should be inside of lib. Then it'll be found. Okay, let's give this another try. Okay, good deal. Now the next thing we're going to do is break apart our router into two files. Since the router has basically everything in it right now, we'll just make another file, call it page controller, I guess. And let's put it under a controller directory, because normally you'll have one router and you'll have lots of controllers in an MVC framework. And we'll copy all this in and just call this campsite.web.pageController, like so. Now we'll go to the router. Right now the router is doing all the work. The app doesn't even know about the page controller. We'll start replacing functionality bit by bit and dishing off what the router was doing to the controller. So we'll start with content for, that's going to be the same. Content for home, we don't even have this in our app because we have the cowboy static handling the home route. We'll pass the con to the page controller and have it call a method called to. So we'll change this into an atom. Just like that. And we'll do the same for contact. And in the page controller, there's a bit more work for us to do. We're going to take the names of the routes, or I should say the names of the actions, since it's actions that controllers deal with, and we'll make those the function names. So instead of a function called content for, we're going to have a function called to, and it's not going to be a private function. So function to, and it will take a con and possibly a message, and then it will do the same thing that it's already doing now. Essentially, we'll put the output into the con, and we'll add in a message here. And then our call is going to be a little bit different as well. So the call will take a con and an action, and we're going to dynamically apply that. Apply will take the name of a module, and we want to use this module. You can do that by doing double under module double under. It's the exact same thing as typing campsite.web.pageController, except we can change the name of the module and it's not going to break. And then an action, and then we will also pass in a con and a message, and we'll just make the message controller here. Content for will use that, or this one is home. We no longer have that route. It's dealt with by static. To will take that message and insert it into the response body. Contact will be basically the same kind of change. And we're not going to do anything with a message for contact. We'll just keep it as is. All right, let's check out those two routes. Did see some errors come up here. Def P clauses should be grouped together. Undefined module page controller is not available. That means something is probably broken here. Like that. We've got to alias the page controller. Good deal. And is the message coming through? And controller here too. Excellent. Okay, so we got the message through. So now it's pretty much a rote thing to go through the router and the controller and do the same thing for all of these. And the hello route, we don't really need that anymore. I'm gonna get rid of that. Okay, and then we're going to take the not found and the rendering of non-existent routes, and we're just going to rely on the page controller for that. So all of this can go away, and the content for other is going to do the same thing as our other things have done. We don't need the CSV logic here either. We do need something for our stats just to match the route. Okay, so content for other is just going to dish off to other. Page controller.call other and pass it. Already passing it the con, and is that all it needs? It also needs, nope, that's it. Okay, I was messing around a bit with the stats for this. We're just going to rewrite it anyway. So the stats, we're just going to get the stats. We don't need to store the path in here anymore either. So we're matching on routes that start with stats and then finish with some string. And we're going to call the con and pass it, or I should say we're going to pass the con into the page controller, and we're going to call stats. And unlike the others, we're actually going to pass a second argument here, or a third argument. First is the con, second is the action, which is stats. We're also going to pass in the name, and we're just going to pass that in an option. So we'll say the name is the name that we captured up here. So we don't have a function head to handle that right now. We're going to have to write it in the page controller. So we have a call that takes 2 arguments. We need one that takes 3. Con action, and we'll call it params. And we're going to pass in the con. We don't really need to pass in a message. That's just a default. We'll pass in params. So we've already got everything parsed nicely for us. We've just got a con, and oops, we've got to name it though. So it's called stats, and it's not private. And we'll receive a con and some params, and inside the params will be a name. And we will save that in a parameter called name. We'll call this path, and let's rewrite the middle part. There are 3 scenarios we want to cover here. So we want to handle the same functionality we already have. So if the file name ends in .csv and that file exists, then we want to send the CSV to the user. If it doesn't end in CSV, but there is a file named that name.csv, then we'll just render it. For example, if you go to stats/alchemist.csv, it'll download the CSV for you. If you go to stats/alchemist, we want it to just render it on that screen so the user, i.e. me, doesn't have to download a CSV every time they check their stats. So the best way to do this, oh, and then the third case is that there's neither of those is true, and then we just do a not found. So the best way to deal with this, since there are multiple conditions and it's not all revolving around the value of a single expression, we'll use a cond. A cond is kind of like a switch statement in other languages. So on the left side, we put the condition, and the first condition is that the name matches, and this equal squiggly that I've got highlighted here is just a regex match. So if it matches something.csv and then the end of the name, oops, there we go, dollar as end of the string, then we also need to make sure that the not just that the name ends in .csv, but that such a file exists. So say and file.exists at that path. Then, so use the arrow for then. It's just like when we're doing pattern matching in other places. Send CSV, con, and path. If it doesn't exist, then we'll make it to the second line. Anytime it exists, the first line will match, and it just short circuits the con. So if it doesn't exist, but there exists a file that is the name we've got .csv. In other words, there could be an alchemist.csv file, and the path is just alchemist. Then we'll render the CSV. We're going to have to write that function. And the catch-all, if none of these things happen, we'll just send a 404. And we'll pass the stats to the 404, which we've got to remember to handle. Okay, send CSV is just going to be if the file can be read. We already know it exists, or it wouldn't have gotten to this function. File can be read. If we get an OK and data, we set the header to content type of text CSV, and we send the data in the body. And that's what we've already seen working when you download the file. And if for some reason the file couldn't be read, then we just redirect to not found. Render CSV is a new function, which I guess I have already written off screen. Sorry about that. We break the data into header and lines, and if that exists, we split the string, because the whole file is going to be one string. We split it on new lines. This is to match all three kinds of common new lines. This would be Unix, this would be Windows, this would be very old Macs or some other weird systems. And we've got all these lines. The first line is the header, then the rest will just be an array of lines. And we'll take the titles from the header by splitting on commas, and then we'll pass titles and lines into the con and render a template called stats that we'll have to make. Otherwise, so say they went to the address stats/magician, and there is no magician.csv, then we'll just render, then we'll just dish it off to not found. Not found is getting a con and getting a route. Actually, that's going to work exactly the same. What's going to be a little different is other. So other, as you may recall from the router, is anything that didn't match anything else. And since we've set up a template reader, we check for a template. So if someone goes to a route that doesn't exist, at least not that we know of, we will try to see if there's a template there. If there is a template of that name, then we render the template. If there isn't, then it's not found. Back in the router, our other function is just calling other, and it's not passing the path. And we're going to need that. So we will pass in a params map, and we'll just say path is other, the same other that did not match up here. So it's going to look like this. It's going to be some kind of path like that. Then in the page controller, let's better save that. And in the page controller, we're going to make the function called other. We'll take in a con, and then we'll have to get the path out of the params. And instead of other, this will be path. Okay, that's quite a bit. Let's make sure that at least some of that works. Missing terminator end. That is almost definitely from a new function I made for the do starting at line 1, so it could be anywhere. do end. Maybe in the stats, cond. Yeah, I didn't have one in the cond. Okay, and those can be def p. This can be as well. Okay. All right, you don't use wildcard in the cond. You just make sure that the last expression evaluates to true. Okay, that looks somewhat promising. So 2 still works. That should still work. Let's do a bad route. Excellent. Stats / alchemist.csv. Good. I don't want to download another one though. All right, good. Now it's time to make the template. So our stats template is receiving titles and lines. The titles are just going to be the names of the column headers in our CSV, and the lines are going to be a bunch of comma separated values. Easiest way to display all this is with a table, and we're going to have a table head, and in the table head we're going to have all the titles, and then we'll have a whole bunch, like for each line we're going to have a TR and a closing TR, and for each item we'll have a TD and a closing TD, basically just like that. So titles should be pretty simple. Actually, they're going to need a TR as well. TR before the titles and after the titles. Titles are just going to be the items themselves, since they've already been split from the controller. So just for T from titles. Titles is what the controller is passing in. Do table head, and then the title, and then close the table head item. I don't usually call those THs actually. Then we end our markup section. Each line, okay, so that will be for line in lines. Lines is what those lines are named. Do, and put the end here. And then each of these items is going to be let's see, it's going to be so the line's got commas in it. It'll be something like number of views, comma, number of subscribers, comma, Elixir ranking. So we'll start with a line and we'll string.split it. We'll just do like so. String.split, and splitting on commas, of course, since it's a CSV. Then we'll map that into TDs with whatever was inside of the split. So each of those numbers would be its own table data. So enum.map anonymous function TD, whatever the value of that item is, so like the number, and TD, closing the TD, close the map, and don't need this TD anymore, and close the TR. Okay, that should work, but it's no guarantee with all that. Alchemist without the CSV. Template compile error. Isn't there an Alchemist.csv? I think there is. There is. Unsupported option true, or D, given for file. Unsupported option D. Oh, do. All right. And it doesn't have all the same data that was on alchemist.camp because this is just running locally on my computer. It hasn't been collecting stats every 6 hours for however many days. Okay, so this is working. Excellent. Now, looking at our controller, I would say it's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. It's definitely got a whole bunch of stuff in it. The router is looking a lot better. It's not using that. All of these are one-liners. Router is looking much better. So the next steps would be to refactor the controller a bit. We don't need to have this in every single controller. We might have a page controller and then a user controller and then a comment controller or post controller or whatever. And typing this into every single one will get tedious. So let's make a controller in our OWL framework and have it define this in a macro, and then we'll inject that into every single controller in our app. OWL, new file called controller.ex. Our OWL controller is owl.controller, and then we'll get rid of the white space. I hate that. Then we'll make a macro. This is literally the simplest kind of macro that exists, at least that I know of. It just does a copy paste. So if we def macro using, and then whatever we put between the quote and the end will be pasted into any file where we use that macro. So quote do there. That didn't quite work out as intended. Okay, and the one kind of special thing we can do here is, so right now every controller where we say use OWL controller will automatically have this defined. We might want to define our own behavior though. Say you're dealing with a weird controller, like I don't know, like a controller that sends emails to people, or there's some sort of unusual behavior in it. We might want to redefine the call, and we wouldn't normally be allowed to redefine the function, but we can use def overridable and then say which functions can be overridden. In this case, it's call to, like that, and the syntax we specify it with is call :2, and we also want to get the 3-parameter version of call. Okay, now with this saved, we don't need this in our page controller or any other controller we make. And all we have to do to get all of that functionality in there is use owl.controller. This still works. Got one more set of stats generated since, oops, indie hackers, hey there. Since we've got that, got it set up such that it generates stats or checks for stats and adds a line to it every time the application is started. Just go to some wrong address, good. Go to 2, okay, good. Main page still good, all is good. I'm gonna call this a win. So there is still some work to be done here, but it does look much better, especially the router. The router is a thing of beauty at this point. Not exactly, we'll make it a DSL next episode. It'll take a few more macros, but not too bad. But the page controller is, it's a little overburdened. Some of this is just because we should probably have a separate stats controller. That's not a difficult thing. Bigger deal is that this CSV, maybe that should go on the stats controller. So I would say, setting functionality aside, the next thing to do with this app would be to separate views from controllers. The view should be handling all this template stuff. And after that, maybe make a nicer DSL for the router so that we don't have to define a function for every single route that should be matched. So that's it for today. If you found this useful or interesting, by all means, click subscribe, click on the bell, like I say every episode. That's because if you don't click on the bell, YouTube may not ever let you know of future episodes' existence. Although, I guess you could just go to alchemist.camp, the website, or come back to this channel and probably find them. More importantly, if you have questions or anything you want to learn, leave a comment. Actually, this very set of building the Alchemist camp came out of a request, came out of a few requests. People have been curious how I'm making the website while making so many videos, even while I'm not working on this full time. Other people have asked about making a Phoenix-like framework or doing anything with Cowboy Server. So this is really the amalgamation of all those requests. And while I'm going to finish this one for sure, maybe not every episode in a row, but like this one is definitely in the pike, I am listening to what people want for other future episodes. And I know there are a bunch of people who want to see Phoenix. That is going to happen. This whole webpage is going to get rebuilt with Phoenix. It's hopefully going to be mostly a drop-in process, but it's kind of it's kind of one of those things where you could learn Phoenix first, then Elixir. I think it's worth it to spend a lot of time with Elixir and just add new things bit by bit, like first Elixir, then Mix, and then maybe play with Ecto and OTP, and then Phoenix. But be assured, Phoenix lessons are coming and suggestions are being listened to. So until next time, code on and enjoy your 2018.